everybody. My name is Lauren Boucher. I am the Southeast Regional Consultant for Digital Teaching and Learning at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And I am joined by my colleague. I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Graham, and I'm the North Central Regional Consultant for Digital Teaching and Learning.
So this is either the fourth or the fifth. I can't keep count. Fifth session in our coaching webinar series. We're super thankful for all of you joining in today. If something happens and you got to scoot out, that's okay. We will put this on our NCDPI YouTube channel. So let's get started. Actually, if you have been to all 5, I want you to put your name in the chat and raise your hand, say me. That way we can celebrate you. But today we're going to be talking about coaching for emotional resilience. And there's 2 places where the information that I have to share with you today is going to come from. The first one is our anchor text for this year. It is Arise, the Art of Transformational Coaching. And the other is a book that I go back to often. This is super powerful, same author, Elena Aguilar, but it's called Onward. I truly believe this needs to be on every educator's bookshelf. You can see I have everybody jokes on my sticky notes. You can see that I read this several years ago. So my sticky note game has definitely evolved. And I have a whole new system, so it's super exciting. Jen's showing all of her sticky notes. So when I thought about the why is this session necessary? What is the purpose of us coming together today to talk about coaching emotions? I had lots of thoughts. I even wrote all my thoughts down, and I did my 5 whys. If you join one of our earlier presentations, to help me get down. And my biggest thought was that this idea that emotions can be very scary and uncomfortable. And I want to take a time out real quick. I learned something new about Google Slides. They now have remove background. So if you did not know that, I did not know that, totally changed my life. And I found that out when I saw it pop up for my little girl here. So total aside, but you can now, you don't have to use remove BG. You can actually remove the background right in Google Slides. Okay, now back on topic. So emotions can be scary and uncomfortable, especially for someone like me. My secondary color, if you are familiar with True Colors, is blue. I very much so consider myself an empath. So I absorb the emotions around me. And so I can very easily tell when somebody is upset. I can tell when they're frustrated. I can tell when emotions are strong. And I absorb that and then reflect that right back out. So emotions make me very uncomfortable. People who are experiencing very strong emotions that might not be perceived as positive emotions, I struggle with, because I need everybody to be that balance and level. And I feel like it's my job and my responsibility to get them back there. Yes, I know that's not reality, but that is how I feel. And so, again, this Onward book has really helped me let go of some of that, but also given me some tools to help myself and others, come back to that level. So the why that I settled on is that this learning opportunity will provide instruction and resources for coaches to help their clients and themselves build emotional resilience so that they are able to bravely and compassionately meet the needs of their students. And can I just say, I did not use ChatGPT on this. Whoop, whoop. So buckle up. We are going to go on an emotional roller coaster today. No, I'm kidding. We are going to talk first about the 4 components of emotional intelligence. And so we're starting off in the book Arise, and everything from Arise today is going to come from chapter 2. So if you want to go ahead and flip to chapter 2, if you have the book with you, that starts on page 57. The section that we're going to start in right now is on page 61. So there are, like I said, 4 components of emotional intelligence, and they build upon each other. So like this first starting point for emotional intelligence is having emotional awareness. So what that looks like, some indicators that you have emotional self-awareness, would be to know and recognize when you're actually experiencing an emotion. And we're going to talk about that today, how you can recognize it and the importance of naming it. I know which physical sensations reflect which emotions. I know that when I get very nervous about something, I am probably going to get a stomach ache. So I know that if I have a meeting come up or something, that I am either consciously or unconsciously seeing as a potential stressor, my stomach hurts. If I get embarrassed, I flush. Like you can starts at the shirt line and just goes all the way up. So knowing which physical sensations reflect which emotions. Being able to recognize thoughts that indicate that you're experiencing an emotion and that you can identify it, so that you have the ability to put a name to that emotion. And I'm going to give you a tool for that a little bit later. I have a wide vocabulary to label my emotions, and I know the way I express emotions affects others. So those are the indicators that you have stepped into the world of emotional intelligence and you are emotionally self-aware. So once you have met the level of emotional self-awareness, then you move on to emotional self-management. And some indicators of emotional self-management include exploring what gets you emotionally activated. So what triggers you, so that you can anticipate when, where, and how you might be triggered. So if you know that your evaluation meeting with your supervisor is typically a triggering event, you can prepare yourself emotionally for that and go ahead and have some of those coping strategies in your pocket to help you maintain that balance and that even level. I have strategies to regulate myself when I'm triggered or experience uncomfortable emotions. We're going to talk about some of those today. I am adaptable when things happen that I didn't expect, even if I'm disappointed. This is an area I'm still working on. I think this is probably a lifelong thing for me. Managing disappointment is within that emotional self-management. I have a positive outlook on life. I don't deny or suppress sadness, anger, or fear, but I have a perspective and know that nothing is permanent. And if you leave with nothing else today, this bullet point has 2 key principles for me that I learned from reading Onward. And the first of those is that sadness, anger, and fear, although we typically ascribe a negative or prescribe a negative connotation to those, emotions really aren't positive or negative. They're messengers. They're telling our bodies something. So if I can use that, if I can recognize it, name it, and then use it, then I don't have to get stuck in it. And the second piece of that is, I have perspective and know that nothing is permanent. The key to emotions is that they are temporary. And so knowing that it's okay sometimes we just need to sit in it, and that's totally fine. Sit in it and process it. But then we can release it. because they're not going to stick. They're like house guests. They're here for a minute and then they're going to be gone. And the last piece of emotional self-management is this idea that I cultivate self-compassion. And this was a large part of chapter 2 of this book. You know, we want so desperately to be compassionate towards others that we often don't recognize when we're not having it for ourselves. And we, as coaches, as educators, as human beings, are just as important as those around us. We deserve to thrive just as much as the teachers that we coach. And so giving ourselves the same compassion that we offer others is a part of this idea of emotional self-management. Moving on, the next level, or the next kind of step in this idea of developing emotional intelligence is social self-awareness. So the first two of these kind of deal with things that we have to work on internally. With social self-awareness, this is what some indicators of this is being able to infer other people's emotions by using body language, facial expressions, tone of voice like pitch, volume, tone, even pace. Some people, when they get upset, they like to blah, 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 like they just verbal vomit. And that's a key to letting us know that they are stressed in some way. So we're beginning to look outwards. I recognize alignment or misalignment between someone's words and their body language. So there was a movie we were watching the other night, and the character was asked a question, and the words were affirmative, but their head was doing this while they were giving the affirmative, which, you know, was a total misalignment of what they meant versus what they were saying. And I told my husband, I was like, I think I would have to really think about saying one thing but shaking my head in another. So I found that very interesting. I anticipate other people's reactions to what I say and do. And I think as a coach, this is huge because it allows us to plan for what may come our way during a coaching session or during a professional learning session. If we can anticipate some reactions, we can already have some tools and some responses in our pocket ready to go when we get those from our clients. I infer how other people feel about other people. So when you are doing professional learning settings and you want people to work together in a group, you are aware and can infer who would be great to put into groups together and who we might want to keep not together. Who are those people that are going to play off of each other? I refrain from making assumptions about what people are thinking or feeling. I predict how my words and actions will influence others. I perceive power dynamics between people, and I anticipate other people's perspectives. So to me, social awareness is all about pre-thinking about situations that you may find yourself in. It's all about inferring what other people around you are experiencing or will experience based on what you have to share and present to them. And then this final level is relationship management. So this is like the master's or the doctoral level work within our emotional intelligence journey. And so some indicators of this would be I cultivate trusting relationships. I build relationships across lines of difference. So being able to coach teachers who are approaching a problem or approaching a student from different perspectives or different directions, being able to build a bridge there and help them communicate their own perspectives and opinions in respectful ways. I repair trust when it breaks. I engage in healthy conflict and respond to unhealthy conflict. I access my courage to have challenging conversations. I'm an avoider. I avoid conflict at all costs. Jen's laughing because she's probably seen me do it. Um, I have a tendency not to deal with things if I think that there's going to be controversy involved. Again, because I'm the empath and I need everybody to be in balance, and conflict is not balance. So having the courage, and chapter 2 talks a lot about courage. So if you haven't read it yet, I do encourage you to read that and learn all about what it means to have courage. I problem solve when challenges arise in relationships. I navigate power dynamics, and that can be, such a minefield when we're dealing with educators. It's very rarely is it going to be a non-high stakes situation that we're dealing with. We're talking about, children's learning and children's success. So it is typically going to be, a high stakes situation. I respond to other people's needs and I set appropriate boundaries. So those are the 4 components. Starting with ourselves, we have to understand our own emotional state and our own emotional IQ before we can then turn outwards and start inferring and making predictions about those that we work with. So I've said the word emotions a lot, but we haven't really talked about what an emotion is. So I want to pause, and you can either unmute or share in the chat what you think emotions are. Let me see if I can open up the chat on this. Jen, I've got my screen like I want it. So before I go pushing buttons and playing, I'm going to let you tell us if anybody is putting anything into the chat. Again, feel free to unmute.
There are typing bubbles.
Typing bubbles. Love the typing bubbles.
Expression of feelings.
Okay. We often equate emotions and feelings. Absolutely.
Like your physical reaction of what's going on inside of you, like your feelings, how does it physically manifest itself?
Love it, Gladys. Thank you.
Paige says emotions are the outward expression of inward feelings.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Paige seems like she would be a good wordsmith.
Katie said feelings triggered by experiences.
Absolutely. Are there still bubbles? Do we
No
need to wait
bubbles.
another minute? No bubbles. All right. If you have a thought, feel free to get those bubbles started and enter it into the chat. So one thing that really stood out to me when reading Onward, and this comes from, if you have the book, comes from page 45, which is when she really dives into talking about what emotions are. And she says, with an understanding of emotions, you can accept their existence, recognize where you can influence a situation, and let go of what is outside of your control. And that to me was a very freeing thing to realize. Once I can recognize it and name it, I can then let it go. I very much so think in circles and will, still at 10 o'clock tonight trying to fall asleep, be thinking about an emotional experience that I had earlier in the day and that I can't let go of it. Medication helps. Never be afraid to seek help in that way. But learning what emotions are and how to use them has really helped me to break those spirals. So, oh, come on. There we go. So what are emotions? Number one, emotions are a reaction to an event. So something happens, there's a trigger, and you have an emotion. They are temporary, and I put this in all caps because sometimes we can feel an emotion so strongly that we can't see a way around it. And so if we can remind ourselves that this moment, this too shall pass, that this is temporary, we can buckle down and experience the emotion and work our way through it. Emotions are amoral. I mentioned that, some emotions may have a negative connotation, and we may even label them as good or bad. But the emotion itself is amoral. So it's neither good or bad. Emotions are part of the human experience. So if you are human, you have emotions. The people that you work with, last time I checked, are still human. They are going to come to you with emotions. Something that you say may trigger an emotion. Something that you do, something that you share with them may trigger an emotion, and we need to be prepared for that. Emotions are messengers. We've all heard the term fight or flight, right? So, back in prehistoric ages, let's go back to the Neanderthals, which I just watched a really great Netflix documentary on. If you haven't seen that new one, it's brand new, it's really good. New discoveries, new ideas, love learning. There you go. They're messengers. And so if the Neanderthals didn't have emotions when, that tiger or a lion or whatever was coming up behind them, if they didn't fear that, they would get eaten. So, that whole idea of fight or flight, that is a message, or actually that's a reaction to an emotion of fear, excitement, hunger. So, emotions can be messengers. And if we take a minute, again, recognize it, name it. Once we put a name to it, that then gives us clues as to what that emotion is telling our body and what our reaction could be or should be. And then finally, like I said, it's a potential source of energy. If I'm a Neanderthal and that, meat-eating animal is creeping up on me, whether I haven't slept in 24 hours or not, I'm going to find the energy to get up and go. And so, anger can be a great source of energy to protest, to do something about it. Happiness, you could be completely dead tired and find out that you have won the lottery. You're going to have the energy to celebrate at that point in time, right? So use your emotions as the sources of energy that they can be. So it's important to recognize that, and many of you said this in your definition of an emotion, is that something happens and your body reacts, and that feeling is the emotion. So there is actually a cycle that we go through every single time we experience an emotion. And so you can think we experience hundreds, if not thousands, of emotions a day. So we're constantly going through this loop. The reason why knowing and understanding this loop is so important is because each of us as individuals tend to go off the rails if we're associating the emotion with a bad connotation. There is somewhere in here where we can get ourselves in trouble. I'll be completely honest with you. Mine is super early in the cycle at interpretation. I am horrible about something happening, somebody doing something, somebody saying something, and I immediately start telling myself that I have done something wrong. I've said something that ticked that person off. I said something or did something that hurt their feelings. I take everything on. So right at the beginning of this prompting event, I have already thrown myself into a whack, for lack of a better phrase. So there's actually a whole chapter in this book on not telling ourselves stories when we don't have all the information. So that was super helpful for me. So if you find that you immediately go off the rails at interpretation, there are strategies that you can use to stop that. You can just remind yourself, hey, not everything's about you. I know we like to think that the world revolves around us. I sure do. But sometimes it's just not about you. It's like that movie. Maybe he just doesn't like you, or maybe she just doesn't like you. It's not about you. So the prompting event happens. We tell ourselves some kind of story, whether we have all the facts or not. Then we may or may not experience a physical response, depending on how strong that emotion is. I've already mentioned, if I'm super nervous, my stomach is going to get upset. If I'm really embarrassed, I'm going to flush really, really red. Sometimes people will overheat. Sometimes people will get heart palpitations. I've even heard people's their fingertips will tingle. So we all experience emotions in different ways. That physical response is going to lead you to have this urge to act. And it's somewhere between your urge to act and when you actually act that a lot of other people tend to go off the rails, because something may pop into their head. And if we don't engage that filter, it may come out of our mouth before we actually stop and think about it. Students who are dealing with lots of stress at home, their basic needs aren't being met, they are very easily triggered. And so a lot of times when students get into a physical altercation, there was no interruption between that physical response and the action. We had the urge to act and we just did it. We swung. So this is also a really great tool to introduce to your students to help them think about and reflect, where in these 6 steps do we tend to lose control and things tend to go awry. And then once we have had the action, then we have to deal with the after effects, whether that's, again, positive or negative. I may have to apologize because I didn't engage my filter and something not nice came out. Or maybe it wasn't not nice, but I just didn't stop and consider all perspectives before I said something. We call that the foot in the mouth syndrome. Some people are really good at that. So, again, we're going through these cycles hundreds of times a day. It's super important when we are experiencing a very strong reaction to a very, very triggering event to be able to recognize where we are in this emotion cycle so that we can start employing strategies like grounding, which basically like putting your hands on something and describing to yourself what you feel. If you're able to go outside and actually take your shoes off and put your feet in the grass, that is like literal grounding. Naming 3 things you can hear, 2 things that you can see, and 1 thing that you can smell. Box breathing. So in 4 counts, out 4 counts, in 4 counts, out 4 counts. Nobody knows that you're necessarily doing these things, but they help you reset. They help that amygdala that's in the back of your brain that shut down when you got stressed to open back up again, to allow rational thoughts to be able to go back and forth. So when you yourself are experiencing an emotion cycle or when you recognize in one of your clients or a whole group of clients that we're in some kind of emotion cycle, what can we do? So the first thing is to understand your emotions. Understand their purpose. Their purpose is to send you some kind of message to keep you safe. Whatever safe looks like, whether that's emotionally, mentally, or physically, an emotion is a message to keep you safe and to bring you back into balance. Recognize when you're feeling an emotion and put a name to it. I didn't actually know that there were so many emotions to name. So I've printed this out. I have it on my desk, like underneath protection, so I can always go back to it. It's in my reflection journal, and I share this with everybody that I can. There are lots of different examples of this. This was the one that I thought matched the colors of the presentation the best, so that's the one that I went with. But if you just do a quick Google search of emotion wheel, tons of stuff comes up. But essentially, there are 7 to 8, depending on your source, core emotions. So feeling bad, feeling fearful, feeling angry, disgusted, sad, happy, or surprised. And then there are different levels of those core emotions that kind of build off as the circle gets bigger. This is a great tool. Again, give to your teachers, students. I think it would be great if every student had this printed and laminated on their desk to help them articulate where they are. Maybe even just giving them the first 2 circles to start with until they learn. But this is a great way to build emotional intelligence in your students as well as self-awareness, because once kids don't always know, and adults, let's just put it, people don't always know what they're feeling. They just know they're feeling something. So providing a menu where they can say, it's not really stressed, it's more just kind of unfocused. So like they're able to pick where they are from a menu, which is super useful. Next, recognize where you are within the emotion cycle and where you typically, like I said, go off the rails. When do you typically lose yourself in that cycle? Is it at the interpretation? Is it at the urge to act or the act? So that you can use one of those interrupting strategies, grounding, box breathing, what you notice, what you smell, what you hear, any of those. There's a ton more. And I think as adults, as coaches and as teachers, if we can be open and honest and upfront with our students when we're going through that and kind of do like a think aloud or a talk aloud, I think that's a great teaching moment that shows our students how to appropriately handle when they're triggered. It's a great way to model. Number 4, pay attention to your body's reaction to the emotion and use the interrupting, and that should say interrupting strategies if you can. Number 5, be prepared. And I mentioned this. If you are going into a situation where you suspect or know that something is going to be said or done that is going to trigger you, be prepared. Just a second. I actually bought off of Amazon. It was a pack of fidgets, and they have different textures, and they're super small. I've actually, y'all don't laugh, I've actually made an interrupting bag. I have found that if I have paper to fold or play with, that is a stress relief for me. I've even added a small little journal where I can jot some feelings down and work through that. But the fidgets are a great way to ground too, because they all have different textures, and you can stop and think about the texture, describe the texture, and that's just giving your brain and your amygdala just enough of a break to allow yourself to be more present in that moment and make better decisions about what urges to act you're actually going to act on. And then the last thing is to accept your emotions. Remember, they are a part of the human experience. You cannot help the emotions that you feel. So rather than fighting them, whether you're perceiving them as positive or negative, rather than fighting them, embrace them, accept them, take them for what they are. They are a message to your body, to act or react in some kind of way to keep you safe. They are also temporary. Again, if you remember nothing from here, this too shall pass. And it's okay to sit in your emotions, but it is not okay to wallow in your emotions. Feel it, name it, accept it, and let's move on. So one thing that can help you coach your clients and emotions and yourself is to identify what are your core values, because this will help you determine how you react. It will help you determine your ways of being. And so if you have joined us for any of the face-to-face work with Arise, the book is all about coaching behaviors, beliefs, and ways of being. And if you can identify your 3 to 5 core values, that can center you and help your clients center themselves in the ways of being, in the ways of reacting to emotions that align to their core values. Because when our actions and when our ways of being don't align to our core values, that is when we really start to feel uncomfortable inside. So core values, I'm going to give you a handout at the end of the session that has a list of core values. The best way to identify them is to go through the list, pick out your top 10, and then narrow those down to your top 5, and then narrow those down to your top 3. And so I actually did that exercise and came up with my 3 core values are respect, equity, and humor. So if I am reacting to triggering events disrespectfully, or if I am not thinking about issues of equity when I see or hear something, and I'm reacting in a way that is inequitable, that's going to make me feel some kind of way inside. So I would need to go back to those core values and figure out how to realign my actions and my ways of being to fit those values and to bring everything back into equilibrium. I think equilibrium is like a theme when we're talking about emotions. There are things that we can do and things that we can relate to that will keep us in balance. This was a great quote. It's on page 60. Emotions are entwined with our ways of being, and our ways of being are influenced by our core values. So if we can, again, keep all 3 of those things, in sync, we are much more able to deal ourselves with our emotions and help coach our clients. So this was the box at the very beginning of chapter 2 that talks about the difference between, transactional coaching versus transformational coaches. So transformational coaches know that they create the conditions for transformation when working from compassion, curiosity, courage, humility, and trust. So if we can keep these 5 ways of being, and I'm going to hazard a guess that no matter what you end up identifying as your 3 core values, compassion, curiosity, courage, humility, and trust would probably fit somewhere within those 3. I 100% feel confident in that. So the rest of chapter 2 talks about these ways of being of transformational coaches and how each of these 5 can completely impact the effect that you as a coach have when working with your clients. So we're going to start with compassion. So compassion, I love this. Compassion is empathy and action. So when you are taking action based on the understanding of what someone else is going through, you are actually demonstrating compassion. So what might this look like as a coach? So in a coaching session, in a professional learning session, this may look like asking open-ended questions, getting your client to talk and be open, refraining from making assumptions. I went through cognitive coaching training not many years ago, I'm not that old, a few years ago. And one of the things that really, really stuck with me was the phrase, assume positive intentions. And so when I have a difficult teacher that I'm working with, a difficult client in a professional learning session, I try to remind myself to assume positive intentions. Not that this person came in here wanting to be disruptive and negative. What are they experiencing that is making them act like this? What, where can I come to them in a manner of compassion? Acknowledging uncomfortable emotions, bringing awareness to strengths, affirming growth and change. So recognizing and affirming when you can see that someone is making I totally just lost that, an effort. Making an effort to grow and to change and to examine their beliefs, examine their ways of being and their behaviors to positively make a change for their students. And appreciating and affirming vulnerability. That definitely falls under compassion as well. So, I love the example that she gave in here about, overhearing a teacher being really rude to a student. In their next coaching session, she asked, the way that she phrased her questions, I wondered what was going on for you. So an open-ended question, refraining from making assumptions. How do you think your student experienced that interaction? And were you being who you want to be? Like, whoa, that's deep. But again, if we can get our teachers or get our clients to do the self-examination work, to identify their core values and really look at how those mesh or not with their ways of being, we can see growth in our students. And at the end of each one of these sections in the book, she gives an affirmation. And so for compassion, her affirmation is so if you're unfamiliar with affirmations, they are statements that you repeat to yourself about yourself with the idea that if you internalize that, it will manifest. So my compassion arises from an unconditional positive regard for others. We are all connected. We have been dealt different cards in life. Everyone is doing the best they can, and it is not my place to judge others. I can be both compassionate and discerning. Compassion does not mean I agree with what someone does or thinks. Finally, there is no true compassion without self-compassion. Again, she is constantly in this chapter bringing it back to as much grace and compassion as you're giving others, you need to give it to yourself. So the next is curiosity. And if you are not a Ted Lasso fan, it's because you haven't watched the show. But my favorite quote, or well, there's lots of them, but one of my favorite quotes from Ted Lasso is, be curious, not judgmental. Like I love that. So that also goes back to that, assuming positive intentions. But curiosity, by definition, is a state of openness, wonder, and receptivity. I love the word wonder. I think I'm going to add that to a favorite words list. I need to start one because I really like the word wonder. When we feel truly curious, we are willing to be surprised. I love that too. I had all the feels when reading this chapter. We are willing to be surprised and to let our beliefs change. And when we are open enough to let our beliefs change, that is truly when we can start to get into the behavior and the ways of being work as well. However, true curiosity can feel scary. So there's one of those emotion words, right? It can lead to feelings of fear because it requires a willingness to give up everything that you all along have known or believed. True curiosity demands courage and requires the willingness to be afraid, which puts us all in an uncomfortable position. But remember, that uncomfortable feeling, number one, it's a message. What message do you think it might be trying to send you? And it's temporary. We will move and get through it. So the curiosity affirmation that Elena offers is, true curiosity requires that I suspend judgment and all that I think I know. True curiosity requires that I befriend my fear. When I am truly curious, I feel alive, accepting, and compassionate. When I am truly curious, I connect deeply with others, learn, and fulfill my purpose in life. Oh, love it. All right, next, courage. So we're stepping into our fear, right, with courage. So courage means accepting fear and giving it just the right amount of influence in our life. Fear helps us know where to set our boundaries. Like, what's my hard line here? It helps us to know how to get our needs met and how to keep ourselves safe and how to take effective action. So think about that whole fight or flight analogy. So how might courage show up for you when you are coaching a client? Number one is release the worry that you're going to offend somebody with a question. If you are coming at it with compassion and open-ended questions, and assuming positive intentions, don't be afraid to offend somebody. Those emotions are going to be on them, and help them see that is a message that is being sent to them. If they're uncomfortable, why might that be? And that is a great coaching conversation. It also shows up when you effectively use the confrontational approach. And in chapter number 5 of Arise, she gives 50 questions, like not question stems, the actual questions to ask when you do need to be a little confrontational, when your client is just not getting it. How do you help them get it? You're being courageous when you listen to your intuition. When you suggest activities that might be just at the edge of your client's comfort zone. So we're going to push them as far as we think we can get away with. And this one really stood out to me that I know probably every single person on this webinar, whether live or on demand, has had to deal with. You are being courageous when you share data that your client might struggle with. And I think if we can frame everything under the lens that we are here to make the biggest impact for our students. If we can bring it back to that always, those feelings of anger, disappointment, fear, embarrassment, we can get past all of that. So the affirmation for courage says, courage provides me with energy to take risks every day. When I'm aware of my fear, I can speak up on behalf of children as well as on my own behalf because I'm clear that we all deserve to thrive. I accept my fear and I am committed to knowing it so that I can access the power of courage. Love it. The fourth principle is trust the process. And as an elementary teacher, I can experience, I can relate to this because I had them in third grade. I did not really see the fruits of much of my labor, until years later when, and this is going to age me, I'm now, meeting my former students at their new jobs, whether that's, in a drive-through or at Barnes and Noble, seeing them on, connecting with them on social media and seeing the great things that they're doing. I had to trust that the things that I was teaching and trying to instill in them were there when they left me, because I knew I probably wasn't going to see it for most of them. It's the same thing for coaching. It is probably not going to be an overnight transformation. It may take weeks or months or, heaven forbid, years before you really truly start to see the fruits of your labor. But if you are courageous and you are confident and you know and trust the process, keep on keeping on, sisters and brothers, because it will work. One scenario that she gave, and I underlined one thing that she said to this teacher. This was a teacher, a math teacher that she was working with that was very, very resistant to coaching. And she knew this going in. So her starting statement was, again, secondary math teacher. My background is in teaching humanities, I explained, but I feel confident that I can support you to think through the decisions that you make in the classroom. I can guide you to deeper reflection on your teaching, and I can help you find ways to better serve your students. Here's where she hooked them. I'll rely on you to know the best practices in math instruction. So by giving that little nugget of trust to the client was her giving up some control, essentially, but she had trust in her coaching process that even giving up that little amount of control would still lead to dividends down the road. So she said, as I have strengthened my trust in myself and in the process, I found I don't have to work as hard. We sometimes get in our heads that if we're not seeing something right away, it's because we're not doing something. So we need to work even harder. But if we can just sit back and trust that what we are doing will show over time, we can let go of that need to overburden ourselves. I know I'm running out of time. The affirmation for trust is, I trust myself to build skills, find resources, create connections, and be the person I want to be. I trust that when I encounter inevitable challenges, I'll learn and emerge from the adversity more skilled and confident before. Because I know that I can't know everything, which is hard, I trust the coaching process and the timeline in which everything unfolds. And just like I've seen lots of teachers use the bulletin board outside their room about popcorn, popcorn kernels all pop in their own time. Our students will understand something in their own time. Our clients, our teachers will grasp the process and growth in their own time. And then finally, this idea of humility. And one of the, I underline this, is at the top of page 76. It says, many of us have a tendency to overestimate how much we know, how right we are, or how special we are. A tendency that's exacerbated by dominant culture that values accomplishments and status. As a coach, you have almost essentially been raised up a level. And, you know, somebody felt that you would be great in this position because you're in that position. Somebody believed in you. And because, how to say this in a humble way, you are smart. You know your stuff. And it's easy for that to come across sometimes in not so humble a way. So being aware of how you talk to other people and how you approach other people is important. So humility allows you to see yourself accurately, have perspective on your place in the world, acknowledge personal mistakes and limitations, which is uncomfortable, which is an emotion that we can work our way through. Have an open mind, focus less on yourself, and appreciate the value of all things. You can think of humility as knowing your strengths and talents and also knowing that you are one of many with strengths and talents. So we like to, you know, ask the question, who's the smartest person in the room? And the answer is always the room. You know, the collective mind is always stronger than one individual. So the humility affirmation reads, I know that I am not better than anyone else, that I have made mistakes and am a developing person, and that I don't know everything. I recognize that I have strengths and talents and other people do too. So one thing that will help you coach and it will help your clients be receptive to some of this information are these 4 steps that Elena outlined in not such a concrete way, but I inferred. So here we go. All right, number 1. When you are going into a coaching session or a professional learning session, and I would even do this activity with, you know, your clients a few times as well to make this a habit. But think to yourself, my intention is, but frame it in a positive light. So my intention is to keep my mouth shut and just make it through the next hour is not it. So setting a good positive intention for the time that you are going to be held captive. Number 2, how do you want to be experienced? How do you want other people to experience you during this? Do you want to be the negative Nancy or the Debbie Downer who just has nothing nice to say and kind of brings the whole mood of the room down? Or do you want to be experienced as a person who asks thoughtful questions, whatever that looks like to you? Then identifying what that looks like or sounds like. So I want to be experienced as XYZ, and that will look like and sound like ABC. And why does this matter? Why is it important? I think this is a really, really great opening activity, not necessarily welcoming inclusion. I think this is a little bit deeper work than a welcoming inclusion. But I do think if we can all get into the habit of these 4 steps before we are going into any situation where we're going to be gathering with other people, I think that is super powerful. So it is 5 o'clock on the dot. If you are joining live, if you're on demand at this point, thank you for sticking around. Thank you, our live audience, for sticking around as well. I took a note from Jen's session slide, smarter, not harder. I really tried to keep it to less than 6 words. I didn't always succeed, but I tried. And I'm providing the slide deck for you as a coach. If this is something that you want to take and make a copy of and edit for your particular audience, feel free to do that. I also created a handout to go along with this session, where again you have access to the slide deck. You have this is another presentation that I actually did at NC Slamma several years ago that goes more into emotional resilience. Here is a copy of the emotion cycle, as well as a reflection that either you can do or you can lead your clients through about getting to know the emotion cycle. Here is a link to the core values list if you want to print that and do that with yourself and your clients. Here are the core emotions. This is just a list. If you want the wheel, this is the Google search that I did, and you just pick one. And then Elena Aguilar on her website, Bright Morning, has tons of podcasts and blog posts that go along with her teachings. And so these were some that I pulled out. Some podcasts that go with coaching emotional resilience, and some blog posts. So there, I'll let you take a snapshot of that real quick. Jen, do you want to talk about, let me go back up, talk about our upcoming webinars while I give them time to get those links?
Sure. So we have 2 webinars remaining in our spring series. The next one will be on April 15th. So we made sure to incorporate the word tax in that one. So we're going to be talking about what to do when you're a coach and your nerves are taxed. And then we really wanted to wrap up with something that could carry you through the summer. And so we are going to work with you in the final one on building a coaching repository so that we can gather all the greatness and use it to really consider how we can grow in our coaching capacity next year.
Awesome. And it is not too late to join the Arise book study. This week starts us looking at chapter 3. So if you haven't started it yet, like, you're not super behind. So you can register and join at this link right here. It is a Canvas course. We are incorporating discussion boards and social media and all kinds of stuff. We would love for you to join us. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to drop Jen and I an email here, and I'm going to open it up to any questions that might be coming through now. Jen, if there are any in the chat box, or again, feel free to unmute and let us know.